Hello. So yes, I'm James Buller from the Home Office. I'm going to talk to you, going to do two stories today. First of all, about passport renewals and how the team leading that work to make that an inclusive service. And further through that, how we went about embedding inclusion in the Home Office amongst the various different design teams there. So to start off with renewing their passport. Has anyone here recently renewed their passport and used the online service? Give us a signal. Yeah, a few of you. Good stuff. Hope you found it easy. If not, please give some feedback. They're still working on improving it. So for those who don't know, the online passport renewals service, it's been going a couple of years now. And it basically enables you to go online and request a new 10-year passport. And in particular, it enables you to provide your own photo and upload that photo online, rather than sending a hard copy in through the post. And so you can do that using your own equipment, using your own smartphone or a digital camera, or by going to the likes of Snappy Snaps, a professional photographer, and getting a digital copy from them. One way or another, you can upload your own photo. Now, a key part of this is that you do require a second person to do it. Selfies don't work. Something to do with the kind of angles and the length of your arm. It just doesn't work. So you go online, you enter some personal details, put in your photo, and that will then be checked by some software in real time. It will immediately tell you whether this photo is acceptable before later on actually being checked by a human examiner. So I'm going to leave this question with you. I'll go on to talk about the other things. But what accessibility issues do you think there might be with that service? So start thinking about that. So back in 2015, when I joined the Home Office, I think the main thing that I'd say that really helped embed accessibility within the Home Office was head of user research and design at the time, Katie Arnold. And she had a real vision to make sure that Home Office services were accessible and inclusive. And one of her kind of drivers was this statement, as she set us to challenge all the user researchers in her team that 1 in 6 participants in our user research should have an access need. Now that might be over the course kind of on average, but ideally one per round. And that roughly equates to the number of disabled people in the population. Now it's worth saying that you tend to use the word access needs because it's a kind of a broader, more general term than disabled and can incorporate temporary disabilities and various other things. So she set us this task, and she'd already brought in a user researcher / trainer who's expert in accessibility to start getting this on board when I arrived. So how do we actually go about making this a reality to meet that challenge and of making the service accessible? Well, we did some training. Got an exercise here that we called Making a Good Website Bad, which is extremely popular. If anyone's here from the BBC, don't worry, we're not saying all these things are wrong with your site. We're actually using this as a good example, and we're highlighting ways that we would make this site worse. And it works really well as a kind of way of making people think about the way the design aspects that can make things accessible or inaccessible. So through this, we've trained over 100 Home Office staff of various digital kind of professions by doing things, sort of giving them various simulation activities, wearing kind of simulation glasses and these wearable things that make you feel very heavy and tired and things. Basically set them challenges. We spend a whole day training people on that, and then we do follow-up modules. As a result of that, we got a number of volunteers in pairs to sign up to be specialists in particular areas. Not comprehensive, we don't have learning difficulties in here, for example. But we assigned people to basically go and research these areas, find out what the user needs of people in them are, and then bring those back and kind of contribute that to the kind of understanding of the design community in terms of how to meet those needs. And that's ongoing to this day. We have a Slack channel, for example, and everyone's constantly sharing blog posts and things about what they're learning about user needs in these different areas. And they're also responsible for kind of going out and making contacts with people in these communities. one of the things we gave these specialists as a task, kind of get them started, was creating some posters, which you may have seen. We basically said, go out and find out about your area and come back and create these posters, these do's and don'ts posters as they become known. So we've got one here for screen readers. We created another one for autistic spectrum and people who have low vision. And there are others available at that URL if you want to go and print them off yourself. They've actually been translated into 13 different languages now, which again you can contribute to as well. Other things we did, we held stalls at our away day, again run by these specialists. Each specialist pair had a stall for their category, and again kind of getting people to experience and setting people challenges. So the guy here, for example, is trying to use the BBC weather website at 800 times magnification while wearing arthritis mitts and struggling. We do other things. We encourage people to go to various events, such as the Site Village event, which is just around the corner from here, so you can go and experience different magnification and braille devices and so on. Basically just getting an idea of what technology is out there and also meeting people. We also found this is a great place to do guerrilla user research as well with visually impaired people. We make contact with other organisations and disabled people-led user groups and charities, kind of usual suspects you might think of. When employed, for example, we actually found this was a really good source of people with assisted digital needs, as Ben was talking about, rather than access needs. But it was a good link up with them, for example. And this is all basically to find people to take part in user research, going back to this challenge of 1 in 6 people that we were set. So we encourage people to go and do home visits rather than bringing people into the lab. It's much more kind of, you're actually studying people in their real environment and also using their own equipment rather than any sort of technical hitches that you might have of trying to bring them into a lab. And we also developed and recruited a panel of staff members for testing on all the various internal services like HR systems and things that we're always building. So we now have a panel of staff members to use who have different access needs as well. A tip for you here, though, even if you don't go into actually recruiting people with access needs specifically in your work, something you can all do whenever you are talking to a participant, just ask them, do they have any access needs? You can use a phrase such as this, any disability or condition, which may affect how we communicate or how you use the internet. As I say, there's 1 in 6 people out there, so you should actually be finding people naturally as you're doing user experience research. And then find out more about what their needs are. So, 1 in 10 people, for example, have dyslexia. And this works really well, just to find who's out there naturally as you're coming across them to kind of help meet that target. So back to the passports story. What inclusion issues might there be with this service? Well, the obvious one, the thing that we usually think about, is the accessibility of the interface itself. So let's kind of take that as read. Let's assume that we've made sure the actual HTML is all good and accessible. Then how about the comprehension of the instructions of how to take this photo and what the rules are around it, what the requirements are? What kind of issues might there be around that? So cognitive conditions and dyslexia, for example. So the team tackled that by really simplifying the instructions, pairing them right back, using as little text as possible and including some nice graphics to assist the understanding. So really trying to simplify things down and produce things in a much more kind of graphical format. But still keeping the text there for people who can't see the graphics, of course. So we've got, and by the way, there were blue. One of the reasons of choice of blue was again to help people with dyslexia. Some people with dyslexia do find that kind of colour backgrounds of various different hues help. And one of the interesting things that came up was a bit of a kind of conflict. You sometimes get conflicts within inclusive design. So some people said that they really wanted all the instructions to be on one page because they kind of forgot. If you had kind of memory issues, they forgot what the first guidance was, and so they wanted it all on one page. And other people who maybe had other kind of conditions said, no, they really liked it being simplistic and kind of one by one. They could concentrate on one thing at a time. So that's kind of comprehensive instructions. Then start thinking about the ability to actually take the photo. Your assistant, maybe they have access needs as well. And then also there's the ability to actually pose for the photo in perhaps the right place. If you're a wheelchair user, for example, can you get a plain background behind you? Or is the white part of the wall too high up, perhaps? Can you get to a professional photographer's studio if you want it taken by someone else? If you can get to Snappy Snaps, can you even get in their building? Can you get into a Photo Me booth? All sorts of these things to start thinking about. The actual photo rules, though, things like, say, having a plain background behind you, making sure there's no objects or other people in it, making sure you have a neutral expression, and having your eyes open and not obscured by glasses. Might there be some issues around that, in terms of your actual ability to meet the requirements? What situations might occur there? Are there situations where the computer would say no? The recognition software that checks to make sure this photo has met the requirements, might there be a problem there? Any ideas? Well, how about people with facial disfigurements? So the team did a lot of work with a charity called Changing Faces and used them to recruit people who had facial disfigurements to come in and take part in user research and try the system out. And so it became clear that one of the things they needed to provide was a way for you to override what the computer said. So the challenge then becomes, how do you do that? How do you tell someone in a kind of sensitive way that you've not met the requirements, the computer doesn't like what you look like, but yet allow you to overwrite it? So it's kind of quite a sensitive sort of content design issue there. So this is one of their first attempts. It's kind of quite wordy. And kind of basically says you failed, you've not met with requirements, and demands that you tell us why you should submit this photo. And as one of the people there sort of suggested she would write, is because this is what I look like, you moron. I'm not sure if she would have done that in the Wheels thing of actually trying to get her passport, but that is what she felt by kind of being made to justify herself, the way she looked. So they came up with an alternative version, a lot simpler, this kind of drop down, tell us a bit more, and just a very simple, this is what I look like, I definitely want to submit this photo. And there was initial worry that people would misuse this, but in actual fact, 90% of the stuff that is submitted through this override is then authorised by a human examiner. So it's not been a problem, basically. So just think about who else this might be good for. Any other ideas from anyone else that this kind of override? Anyone got ideas of who else this could be useful? Any thoughts? So think about maybe someone who's trying to get a photo of their child, for their child photo. The child maybe's got ADHD or something. Just very difficult to make them look straight at the camera for any more than a second. Or someone. Well, yes, exactly, yeah. Someone who, again, for some kind of palsy or something, maybe can't look straight at the camera. Various things like this. If you've got a wheelchair, perhaps the handles of your wheelchair are in the background. Again, you can't make it plain. So various reasons why this might be useful. So back to the Home Office in 2017, we developed what the Access Needs team was doing. At this time, we were basically doing this as a kind of adjunct to our normal day job as user researchers. Me and a colleague, Emily Ball, and we kind of developed this, what we were actually trying to do as a team. We were trying to influence our peers and senior management. We were trying to build capacity by providing resources about accessibility and inclusion. We were doing recruitment, trying to make contact with these groups to provide people to do user research and providing training to our colleagues. And then also doing testing. People would send us their systems, and we would test them against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and give them feedback. And also we're working on sort of more general things around trying to make sure the procurement process was getting better and actually considering accessibility during buying of systems that come off the shelf as well. So a hell of a lot to do, and thankfully we succeeded in getting some more staff. I was put on the team as full-time as lead, and we then recruited 2 accessibility testers. They're split between the quality assurance and test side of the organisation and the what we call the Centre of Excellence product design team. So we now have a team of 3. It's not enough. We still need more people. But bringing these people on board gave us the opportunity to kind of start again and kind of think about, we're all from different kind of slightly different backgrounds and different knowledge, so we had a good opportunity to sit down and decide what did we want to do as a team, what standards we were going to set and how we were going to work. And so we started brainstorming this with sort of notelets and things. What this all boiled down to was we've got the sort of across the top in the red notelets there, we've got the stages, alpha, beta, live of the software lifecycle. We've then got what we're actually going to do, our activities. The green items are the deliverables, so whether it's a report, for example, on the accessibility of a particular system, and then the actual sort of activities we'd go on and things like what the responsibilities of the design team were, so capturing the issues that we found, for example, and going away and fixing them, or doing research with people with access needs, for example. You can read our blog post about this that kind of summarises this and kind of basically says this is the service that we provide to design teams. That's on the Home Office digital blog. And one of the things that's on there is this graphic that one of our designers helped us make to basically just kind of condense that down in terms of what we actually offer. So at discovery stage, before you start building anything, we really want to be involved and give you some consultation, sit down with the team and discuss what is it you're trying to build, or what's the user need here, and what kind of access needs might influence that or might be impacted by this idea. Then once you're starting to kind of play around in the alpha stage, we want to be involved again to see your mock-ups and your designs, and again just kind of give you a bit of a steer on well, this design would work in this situation but not in that, and just kind of preparing you for building accessibly once you get into beta stage and start coding. That then gives you something to actually take to the service assessment, which is one of the things that you have to go through in government to progress your service. To give you something to show, yep, we've spoken to the access needs team and you're on the right track. Then once you're in beta, we offer an expert review, which is where we come along and start checking your code in a bit more detail and kind of the structure of your service. Does it make sense in terms of accessibility? And we'll also try and test the complete service from end to end with a screen reader and make sure we can complete it, or if not, tell you how you need to improve it. Before it goes live into private beta, we offer audits. So we will do a full check against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and again give you feedback. And ideally we want to do that sort of 3 to 4 months before you're due to actually publish this service. So you've got time to review our findings, make fixes, get it back to us, and us kind of recheck what you've done. And then we'll basically do the same again before it goes into public beta and eventually live, and it's kind of signed off. Ideally, we're just checking the kind of delta changes at that stage rather than having to re-audit the whole thing. Kind of depends on how many changes you've made. So that's basically what we do in a nutshell across the kind of life cycle of a service. Back to the passports example now, kind of another aspect that people, that the team looked at. They decided to test with deaf users. And you might wonder, why would you test with deaf users? There's no audio involved in this service. But the thing is, deaf users, people who are born deaf in particular, who are using British Sign Language, of who there's about 87,000, you need to think that English is their second language. BSL is their first language. And BSL also has quite a different grammar and structure to it. So, for example, if I wanted to say, my name is James, in sign language, I would say, name me James. And so that means that written material in English can actually be quite inaccessible to British Sign Language users. And so they wanted to test this service and find out how it fared. It's a really good idea. So they got some people in, and all was going fine. They were going through the service, no problem at all. Content designers had done their job well, and things were making sense to them. And then they got to the most boring page on the entire site of ordering your passport, and asked for their contact details, their phone number and email address. And so I dutifully filled in their email address and then got the phone number. Like, yeah, bit of a problem here. I always find this, one of the participants said, I always find this very, very, very annoying. With all online forms, they never give me the opportunity to say text only. How do I let people know that I don't want you to phone me? Because they're deaf, so they can't take a phone call. They want to still say, yes, I have a phone number, and you can send me text messages. So the team really enjoyed finding this out and came up with an iteration. They put in the opportunity for you to say, yep, only send me text messages or only call me. So they put that in front of some BSL users again, and what was the result? At last, finally, something actually has this. Perfect. That's great. I'm really happy with that. So if anyone tells you, everyone used to go on about in UX about surprise and delight. If someone tries to tell you can't do surprise and delight in government design, you can. You just need to find that sweet spot. So again, who else would that be useful for? Any ideas? The ability to say, only send me texts. Yeah?
Anyone that can't take a phone call throughout the day, they might work in a place that they can't answer the phone, someone with social anxiety issues that doesn't like speaking on the phone.
Bingo, exactly, yeah. Or maybe you're a stay-at-home parent with lots of kids and you're like, I can't take phone calls, just send me text messages. So this is the thing. Inclusive design, you often find things for a particular condition, and then when you think about it, you actually realise this would actually help a whole load of other people who do or would not consider themselves to have access needs. Okay? So inclusive design really often is inclusive design in a much wider sense. So 2018, back at the Home Office, kind of bringing us up to date now. We're really fortunate. One of the things you need when you're trying to embed accessibility is kind of a kind of group effort on it. And so one of the great things is that our service standards team, when they're doing these service assessments, they consider accessibility and testing with users who have access needs as red lines. They're really, really strong on this and on kind of redirecting teams to us, to the access needs team if they haven't come to us first before they come to before they go to service assessments. And so one of the things we often get asked is about, okay, so you keep telling me I've got to do research with users who have access needs, but who do I do that with and when? So we came up with this poster, which again is available at the URL I showed earlier, which I'll flash up in a sec. Basically just sort of saying, right at the start when you're doing kind of contextual inquiry, go and talk to everybody. Go and talk to as many people with different disabilities as you can. And then as you get more and more kind of refined in terms of your product, you can start moving into people who use assistive technologies such as screen readers and dyslexia systems and things that actually rely more and more on code. You can't do that early on, because you haven't got the code for it to work with, or the code won't be high quality enough to do that with. That said, paper prototypes there, for example, it doesn't list blind users, but it does say maybe you could adapt your exercises instead. So, for example, if you had a paper prototype and you had a blind user, you could just describe the interface to them. You could be a human screen reader, basically. And so you could still do the user research with them. Similarly with the card sorting exercise. You could sort the cards out, they can tell you which category they go in, verbally. So just kind of by way of example, going back to the passports, this is what the passports team did. These figures are actually out of date now, but it kind of gives you an idea of the numbers of different conditions they spoke to, so the number of deaf participants and so on, that they spoke to over the course of a year or two. The story doesn't quite end there though. So although the team came up with this iteration of enabling people to actually tell what their communication preference was, they had a problem. They could do that on the front end, on the digital service, but the problem was in the legacy system that they were submitting data into, there was no place to store that information. And even if they could, there was no way at that time for the operations, for the kind of call centre people, to actually send personalised text messages or emails to people. And this is basically due to a kind of long-standing contractual / kind of infrastructure issue. So this really just kind of goes to make the point that you need to think about inclusive design as early as possible. You know, right before you procure a service, you need to be thinking about what are the requirements that we're actually buying here. Because if that call centre system and contract had been designed and thought about inclusively, they would have put text messages in there, and then whatever we built on it would have been accessible as well. So to kind of sum up then, inclusive design must be on everyone's minds, whether you're a developer, a researcher, a designer, whatever. And you must be thinking about it from the beginning and continuously. Because as you go through, different issues will come up, and you need to be using your kind of collective hive mind to think through all the different possible issues that could occur. So think about it from the start and keep thinking about it. Every artifact, every iteration you do, think about what is the inclusive, the accessibility implications of this. Who is this going to cause problems for? So to help you kind of make those kind of arguments to each other and to management, we've produced another set of posters, which is on available at that URL there. We call these the case for accessibility. So we've got things like that building accessible designs is cheaper, because it means you don't have to have so many people running around kind of creating bespoke kind of alternative versions and things. You're not having to take so many support calls and things. People are succeeding first time, kind of unaided. And then the final poster there is a kind of compilation of all of those. So those are all available along with the do's and don'ts posters and the research posters at that URL on GitHub, and you can print them off and use them yourselves. We also hope at some point to turn these into stickers. That's it. Thank you.